Hello, in this video I am going to build an Alteryx workflow that will take a flat file of data and move it into a table in my data lake. This is a typical process as you retrieve or receive data from multiple sources such as web portals or developers that are sending you data, and you simply want to store it for better access so you don't have to remember where it is on your disk, also to share it with other members of your team. And what you typically do is create a workflow that reads that file and moves it into a table, and the next time you create another workflow that does the same thing. Over the years I've developed a standard workflow that allows me to simply send it a file and it does all the work for me. And I took it a step beyond and actually turned it into an Alteryx app that will prompt me for the input table name, the delimiter that separates the text, and then the table name so it can be inserted into my data lake for further analysis. When you see this workflow, it will look very simple to you. Keep in mind that this final workflow has been being worked on for the last couple of years, probably about 4 years. And as I learned more about different widgets, I was finding easier ways, or more simple ways to write this workflow. So don't be disheartened if your workflows have lots of widgets in them. Over time, you'll find widgets that do exactly the work that you need it to do, and sometimes one widget can replace multiple widgets, or just simply streamlining your process. So first, let's take a look at the input data. I have a number of samples of flat file data that I'm going to use, but that's going to be after I actually build the application and not the initial workflow. So for this initial workflow that I'm going to be developing, we're going to simply take a very small file. It has 3 columns, 7 records. One is an integer, one is a string, and one is a date. What I really would like is that those to be properly represented as nearly as possible and stored into my database without me having to do a lot of work. So let's get started. First widget that we need to bring down, obviously, is our input widget. We're going to want to point that to a file. And our file is the test text input. Go down to the T's, test text input, double click on that. Alteryx does not recognize that extension. It gives you a question as to which of the data types you want. In this case, it is a delimited text file. We're not using one of the pre-coded delimiters. Instead, we're using the typical pipe. Our first row does indeed contain the names of the fields. We click OK. The data is properly represented to us. There is indeed a blank line at the end of that data, so it appears down there. If you want to get extensive or more understanding of how to develop something that's a bit cleaner, you might want to remove that in your workflow. But again, since it's a representation of the data, it's good to know that a blank is coming in with this data that you'll have to adjust for. So let's just keep it simple. If we run this, look at our metadata, you see that everything is a v-string. It's not what we want to save this at. We would like for Alteryx to figure out how to choose some good data types, because if I was doing this manually, I would change these data types. There is a widget for that. Over here in preparation is auto field. We make sure we have all the fields selected, so it'll give it its best guess for those. We'll go ahead and run this. And now our data types have become numeric, string, and date. That's good. It gives me a good approximation of what's going on there. Alteryx will not give you a bad data type, so if it doesn't know what it is, it'll turn it into a string. One other thing we want to do is assure that the field names become good table names. Alteryx is very flexible as far as how you name your fields, but databases are nowhere near as flexible. So rather than changing this manually, inside of Developer, there's a number of dynamic tools that you can learn to use. Nice one here is the dynamic rename. It lets me change the names of the fields. This one gets a little bit tricky to use if we're going into the formula, which is what we are doing. So we're going to use a formula to rename the current fields. We want to do that to all of them. And now we come up with what I call the alternate method of developing an expression which contains functions. It's not as easy or as intuitive as well as user-friendly as the formula widget. So as you're developing your own formulas in some of these non-formula widgets, I always recommend that you run a quick little test case using text input and then doing a formula and then just cutting and pasting the formula out. I'm going to attempt to make this formula as we speak. Bear with me should any mistakes occur. But what we want to use is the regex replace formula. And what we want to do is for each of the fields that are coming in, this is just the field names, we want to use the current field. I find it easy just to go ahead and drag current field down. So for each of those fields, it'll iterate through each one, A number, B string, and C date. So we want to replace within that name of the field. And what we want to do is create a subset to be replaced. We must put the matching information or regular expression information inside of double quotes. The open bracket will go ahead and say it is a collection of characters. We want to replace anything that is not let's make this bigger so you can see it. There we go. And while I think about it, let's put it on its own line. So anyway, that is the not. So if it is not in the set of A to Z, capital A to capital Z, or 0 through 9, that collection of letters, wherever it should appear, finishing the expression with a double quote, we want to replace it with an underscore, putting that in double quotes. So this will take anything that is not an alphanumeric and replace it with an underscore. One of the dangers of this is that I might get 2 underscores in a row. That does not cause a problem. I just don't like the way it looks. So what I'm going to do is to embed this regular expression replace with another regular expression in place. So whatever the result of this one, what I want to do is if it has more than one underscore, so again putting my regular expression for matching inside of double quotes, I want to use slash underscore because those 2 characters are the underscore character representation. And I do plus because I don't care how many there are, but if there's more than one, that is what I want to replace. And I replace that with a single underscore. Down the bottom, you can see that it likes the way it looks, so this should work very well. Just to make sure, we will run it before we do anything else by putting a browse on the end of it. It did work. We look at the browse and we can see the actual field names have stayed the same because they did not contain any special characters, but that will come up in one of our other tests. So now what we want to do is to output this data into MySQL database and give it the name of Daisy Hill .my table, just for something to call it. Click OK. Want to create a new table. That's always very safe. Just do unquote to make sure that good column names go up there just in case the field name doesn't get renamed properly. We can now run this very quickly. My table already exists. I've been doing a lot of testing with this little workflow, just getting it ready for you. So let's go ahead and give it a new name. We can actually just edit that there. Let's call it new table. Run this again. Whole workflow is happy. We can see down here that the alias translated to daisyhill.newTable. We can verify what happened by coming over to our MySQL Workbench, hitting the refresh all. Here's our new table. We can click on it. We can see that it took those integers and turned them into a tiny integer, which will work for this data set. Again, Alteryx will not make a bad choice if it doesn't know what to choose for that field from the auto field type. It will simply choose it as a variable string. So let's go ahead and choose the data so we can see what the data looks like. Execute that, and we can see that the data is indeed what we expected it to be. So this is a very nice little workflow. It will run and do the work for this one table. Also, because I used the auto field as well as a dynamic rename, it means that no matter what that input is, it will be able to process through it. So what we want to do is move this over and to make this into an application by allowing the user of this application to make some choices. The first choice they'll need to make is, let's go into our interface widgets real quick. The first choice we'll need to make is to choose a file. You can ask them to enter in the file name, but it's much easier to use the file browse widget. This is going to be input text file. What we want to do is make sure that they can choose any file, because people don't typically name their text files by any specific structure. Sometimes it's txt, sometimes it's dat, sometimes it's info. Hard to say. So basically our file specification will be all files, which is star.star. The user will choose one of those names. And then what we'll want to go ahead and from that choice, we want to update our input widget. We do not want to input the tool because it will make an assumption about the data type, and because this is a text file with an unknown name, it will get very confused. But what we want to do instead is update value. And you can see that right here we have the file name. So we want to go ahead and replace the file name with the file name that was provided by the user. Second thing we want them to do is to tell us what the delimiter is. We'll use a text widget for that, or text box. We want them to enter the delimiter. We can give it a default value of the pipe, so they don't have to change it for that. Our action that we want to take once they enter that is to go ahead and also update the input widget. In this case, though, we want to go down here into format specifications, and we have delimiter, and it'll update the value of the delimiter to what was provided. We're on a roll now, so the last thing we want to do is another text box. We want them to be able to choose the output file name, which is actually a table. Output table name. We need, for a default, give them daisyhill.table name. Just to make it easier for them to remember what to type in. We want to give it an action. We want to use that action to update the value within the output widget. But if you look through here, and I'll make and spread all these out, you see that the actual table name is not here anywhere. It's embedded inside of the file value. The file value includes the name of the database connection as well as the table name. So what we want to do is to go ahead and click on that, but down here at the bottom, click on the replace a specific string. And the specific string we're going to want to replace is the daisyhill.newTable. So what they give me, we'll replace that within the file value, and it'll create that new table. We can go ahead and run this, and it pops up obviously on a different screen. And what we want to look at, and just to bring you up to speed with where we're at, we're going to use our test input 2. It's the same as test input 1, but it has bad column names. These are perfectly fine field names, but they will not work in the database because of the $sign. So in this case, we will test out that dynamic rename. Move this out of the way. We want to choose that. It's text input 2. Click here to find our file browser. We can move around as much as we want, but we happen to be in the right directory. Here's test input 2. Oh, forgot to make 2 other little changes. Let's go back real quick and make those. We want to go ahead and configure how this little widget, this application works. We do that through the interface designer. If you don't already have it pinned over here, you can do it in views, interface designer. Slide that out. You can go ahead and take a look at how it fits. You can rearrange if you want to the different inputs, but we like that order. So let's go down into our properties. We want to make sure people can see the browse. By default, browse is not shown to the user running the application. And just because I like to round things out, we're going to go ahead and use a graphics to make it look pretty. I use a flag that doesn't show up completely. Let's go ahead and choose my workflows. There's my flag. It actually cuts this flag off right through the stripes, which actually looks pretty cool, which is why I use it and haven't bothered going back and figured out how to modify that JPEG to fit. Unpin that. Slide everything over. There we go. And now we can run this. Using the magic wand runs it as an application, not as a workflow. Now you can see my red and white stripes come up. Let's choose that file name again. Of course, we've moved off of that. So we'll go back to Daisy Hill. Down here in the bottom is test input 2. It is also separated with the pipe. And let's put that into table name 1. We'll finish that. It goes ahead and shows us the browser window. And you can see that the column names are now A_number, B_string, and C_date. We want to see how this works. We can do the show output log, and we can see that table 1 was created with 8 records. Let's look at another file. We happen to actually have another file called kennel names. Again, bad field names, and we use a bang rather than a pipe, so we want to test that option as well. Move this back out of the way. We don't even have to close this out. We just go ahead and choose another file. So if you want to run 4 or 5 files through here, you just stay right here and keep choosing new file names. Here's our kennel names.dat. And this rather than a pipe is a bang. We'll call this Daisy Hill table 2. Finish that up. And you can see that we have good column names from kennel name and state code. Here is our data for the name and the state code separate out properly. Looks good. Check the output log and we see the 10 records were written to table name 2. Hit exit because we're done. Brings us back where we were. Last step is to go ahead into MySQL Workbench. Hit the refresh. It will get there. Sometimes this takes a little long, which I don't quite understand. Refresh it one more time. Not very nice of being stubborn. Let's just look at new table 1 because we know it's there. New table 1 doesn't exist. What did we give it? Table name 1 and table name 2. That was not good of me. That's okay. There they are. We found them. Here's table name 1. we can see that it is our differently named columns with the three columns for the 7 records and the null record. Let's go ahead and look at table name 2. And we can see now we have kennel name state code with the kennels information there as well. So now I never have to go back into Alteryx. All I have to do is double click on my application once I save it, and it will go ahead and read a text file and put it in a database for me without me having to do any other coding to do that. It's a great application to have in your toolkit. I hope it helps you. Hope you modify it, maybe customize a little bit for your own usage. There's a number of additional things you can do should you desire. It's all in how sophisticated you want to make it. Have any comments, any questions about how this will work, put them down in the comments box. Always do a like, subscribe, and you can watch more videos coming up. We are next going to be working on some other formats of text data that you might be getting in and how to make it look better within your database as well. Have a great day. Thanks for watching.